Margaret had been driving a taxi the busy streets of Manchester for 35 long years. She was now 68 years old, and her hands looked old and tired from holding the steering wheel for so many hours every day. Her back hurt badly from sitting in the driver's seat for such long periods. Tonight was going to be very special for her because it was supposed to be her very last shift before she finally retired from driving. G-Taxis. The big clock on her dashboard showed that it was almost midnight. The streets were much quieter now than they had been during the busy day hours. Most people were already safe at home, sleeping peacefully in their warm beds. Margaret was thinking about driving back to the taxi station when she saw a man in expensive clothes standing on the sidewalk outside the big business area of the city. He was waving his hand to get her attention. Margaret slowly drove her yellow taxi over to where the man was standing. As he opened the back door and got inside her taxi, she could see him clearly in her rearview mirror. The man looked like he was probably in his early 40s. He was wearing a very nice dark suit and a clean white shirt. But something was very wrong with him. His eyes looked red and puffy, like he had been crying for a long time. His shoulders were shaking just a little bit, and he seemed very upset about something. Margaret had a warm, kind heart and a gentle Yorkshire accent that made people feel comfortable and safe. She turned round slightly to look at her passenger and asked in a soft, caring voice, "Where would you like to go tonight, love?" The man, she would soon learn was named William, just stared out of the taxi window for what seemed like a very long time. He watched the bright street lights and the empty sidewalks as they passed by slowly. Finally, he spoke in a voice that was so quiet it was almost a whisper. "I honestly don't really know where I want to go," he said sadly. "Would it be possible for you to just drive around the city for a while? I promise I will pay you whatever it costs, no matter how much money it is." Margaret had been driving her taxi for so many years that she had met thousands and thousands of different people. She had picked up happy people going to parties and celebrations. She had driven tired workers home after long days at their jobs. She had taken families to the airport for exciting vacations. But she had also seen many sad and broken people who needed help and kindness. Something deep in William's voice and the way he was acting told her that this was much more than just a regular late-night taxi ride. Without saying anything more, Margaret reached over and turned off the meter that counted how much money William would have to pay. She began driving very slowly and carefully through the quiet, empty streets of Manchester. The city looked different at this time of night. The bright lights from the shops and offices made everything look peaceful and calm. Margaret looked at William in her rearview mirror again and said in her gentle, understanding voice, "Sometimes we all need some quiet time to think about important things in our lives. Please take all the time you need tonight. There is no hurry at all." As the taxi moved slowly past the glowing yellow streetlights, Margaret could feel in her heart that something very important was about to happen. She had driven thousands of people over the years, but tonight felt completely different from all those other nights. This ordinary Tuesday night, which had started just like any other night, was about to become something truly extraordinary and special. William sat quietly in the back seat, still looking out at the city through the window. Margaret continued driving slowly, giving him the time and space he seemed to need so badly. She had learned over all her years of driving that sometimes the best thing you can do for another person is simply to be there with them without asking too many questions or trying to fix their problems right away. The streets of Manchester stretched out ahead of them like a long, winding path. Neither Margaret nor William knew yet what this night would bring, but both of them could feel that their lives were about to change in ways they never could have imagined. Sometimes the most important journeys in life begin when we don't even know where we are going. Margaret drove her taxi through the sleeping city, carrying her mysterious passenger toward whatever was waiting for them both in the hours ahead. The night was still young, and there was so much more of their story still to be told. As Margaret continued driving her taxi through the empty streets of Manchester, the silence in the car felt heavy and sad. She could see in her rearview mirror that William was still very upset about something important. After they had been driving quietly for about 10 minutes, William finally started to speak. His voice was so quiet that Margaret had to listen very carefully to hear what he was saying. "I received some very bad news today," William said in a voice that was barely louder than a whisper. "I went to see the doctors at the hospital, and they told me something terrible. They said that I have cancer, and it is very serious. They think I only have about 6 months to live, maybe even less time than that." When Margaret heard these words, her heart felt like it was breaking into pieces. She knew exactly how William was feeling because something very similar had happened to her many years ago. 15 years earlier, her own beloved husband had gotten very sick with cancer, and she had watched him suffer and eventually die from this terrible disease. She understood the fear and sadness that William was experiencing right now. "Oh dear, I am so very sorry to hear that," Margaret said to William. Her voice was full of real care and understanding. "That must be the most frightening news anyone could ever receive." William continued talking, and now tears were flowing down his face like a river. He could not stop crying as he told Margaret about his life. "I have completely wasted my entire life, Margaret. I spent every single day working 16 hours at my job. I missed all of my daughter Emma's important school plays where she acted and sang. I never went to watch her play football matches with her team. I was never home for dinner with my family. My wife Lucy finally got so tired of me never being there that she left me 3 years ago. She told me that even when I was physically at home with them, my mind was always thinking about work. She said I was never really present with my family." Margaret could hear the deep pain and regret in William's voice. She decided to pull her taxi over to the side of the road near a small, quiet park. She turned round in her seat so she could look directly at William and talk to him. Face to face. "Tell me about your daughter again," Margaret said gently. "What is her name?" "Her name is Emma," William replied, wiping tears from his eyes. "She is 22 years old now, which is hard for me to believe. She is studying at a university in London to become a teacher because she loves working with children. We have not had a real, proper conversation in more than a year. I think she probably hates me for being such a terrible father." Margaret's face showed understanding and sadness as she listened to William's story. She had her own experiences with raising children while working very hard to support them. "I want to tell you something about my own life," she said to William. "After my husband died from cancer, I had to raise 3 children completely by myself. I worked 2 different jobs every day just to make enough money to pay for food and rent. One of those jobs was driving this very taxi. I worked so many hours that I was almost never home with my children. I was always worried that they would grow up to resent me and hate me for never being there when they needed me." William looked up at Margaret with interest, waiting to hear what else she would say. "But do you know what I learned after many years of worrying about this?" Margaret continued with a small, sad smile on her face. "I learned something very important about children and families. It is never too late to tell someone that you love them and to really mean those words with your whole heart. Children have amazing hearts that can forgive their parents much easier than we adults think they can. Love is stronger than we realize, and it can survive even when we think we have destroyed it completely." Margaret reached over and gently touched William's hand. "Your daughter Emma probably misses you more than you know. She is probably waiting for you to reach out to her and show her that you care. Sometimes children just need to know that their parents truly love them, even if those parents made mistakes in the past." William looked at Margaret with hope in his eyes for the first time that night. Maybe, just maybe, it was not too late to fix the relationship with his daughter. Maybe there was still time to show Emma how much he loved her, even though he had been diagnosed with this terrible disease. Margaret's kind words were like a small light shining in the darkness of his despair. The two strangers sat together in the quiet taxi, both understanding the pain of loss and regret, but also beginning to feel the first small seeds of hope growing in their hearts. Margaret started her taxi engine again and began driving slowly through the quiet streets of Manchester. But this time, she was not just driving randomly around the city. She was taking William past special places that she thought might bring back important memories for him. As they drove, Margaret could see that William was looking out the window with more interest now, as if he was starting to remember things from his past first. They drove past the big hospital where William's daughter Emma had been born 22 years ago. William stared at the tall building with its many bright windows and remembered that amazing day when he first held his tiny baby daughter in his arms. Then they drove slowly past a small park with green grass and old trees where William had once promised his little girl that he would teach her how to ride her first bicycle. But that promise had never been kept because he was always too busy with work to find the time. As they continued driving through the empty streets, Margaret spoke to William in a gentle, caring voice. "Please tell me more about Emma," she said. "I would love to hear about what kind of person she has become." For the first time since he had gotten into Margaret's taxi, William's face showed a real smile. His eyes seemed to light up with happiness and pride as he began talking about his daughter. "Emma is studying at university to become a teacher because she has always loved working with children," he said. "Ever since she was a very little girl, she showed this amazing caring heart. I remember when she was only 5 or 6 years old. She would take all of her dolls and line them up in rows on the floor of her bedroom. Then she would pretend to be their teacher and would spend hours talking to them and trying to teach them things like numbers and letters." William paused for a moment, and his smile became even bigger. "She gets that beautiful, caring heart from her mother, Lucy. Lucy was always the one who took care of everyone in our family and made sure everyone felt loved and safe." Margaret looked at William in her rearview mirror and said something that surprised him. "You know, William, Emma gets that caring heart from you too. You would not be sitting here in my taxi tonight, crying about your family and feeling so much regret if you did not care very deeply about the people you love." As they continued driving, they passed by an old apartment building that looked small and simple compared to the fancy buildings in other parts of the city. Margaret slowed down the taxi as they drove past this building. "That is where I used to live with my 3 children after my husband died," Margaret said, pointing to one of the windows on the 2nd floor. "It was a very small flat, but it was our home for many years. After my husband got sick with cancer and died, I felt so many angry feelings inside my heart. I was angry at the whole world for being unfair. I was angry at God for letting such terrible things happen to good people. I was especially angry at cancer for taking away the man I loved most in the world." Margaret's voice became quieter as she shared these painful memories with William. "But even though I was so angry and sad, my children still needed their mother to take care of them. They needed someone to make them breakfast every morning and help them get ready for school. They needed someone to hug them when they were scared or hurt. So every single morning, even on the days when I felt like staying in bed and crying. I made a choice to get up and keep going. Some days. That choice to keep living and caring for my children was the only thing that kept me alive. William nodded, his head as he listened to Margaret's story. He understood exactly what she meant about making difficult choices every day. I feel like I have forgotten how to make good choices, he said sadly. I have forgotten how to be a good father to Emma. I think I have even forgotten how to be a real human being who cares about other people. Margaret looked at William with kindness and understanding in her eyes, learning how to change. Your life does not have to be scary or complicated, she told him. You can start with very small, simple things. You could make one phone call to your daughter. You could have one honest conversation where you tell her how you really feel. You could have one single moment of courage where you decide to do something different than you have been doing. As Margaret spoke these words, the sky outside was beginning to change colors. The dark black night was slowly turning into the soft gray and pink colors of early morning. Dawn was beginning to break over the city of Manchester, and the first rays of sunlight were starting to appear on the horizon. Both Margaret and William could feel something important happening inside their hearts. Something was shifting and changing, like ice melting in the spring sunshine. For the first time in a very long time, both of them were beginning to feel a small sense of hope. Margaret continued driving her taxi through the quiet streets of Manchester as the night slowly began to change into morning. She knew of a special place where she often went when she needed to think about important things. In her life, it was a small hill on the edge of the city that looked down over all the buildings and streets below. Margaret drove her taxi up the winding road that led to the top of this peaceful hill. When they reached the top, Margaret parked the taxi in a safe spot where they could see the entire city of Manchester spread out below them like a beautiful picture. The sun was just beginning to rise in the east, and it painted the sky with the most amazing colors. There were soft orange colors mixed with gentle pink colors. And the clouds looked like they had been painted by an artist with a brush. This is my special place where I come when I need to think about difficult things in my life, Margaret said to William as they both looked out at the beautiful view. It is very beautiful up here. Is it not? When I sit here and look at the city below, my problems always seem a little bit smaller and more manageable. William nodded his head as he looked out at the sunrise and the city below. The view really was incredibly beautiful, and it made him feel a little bit calmer than he had felt all night. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his mobile phone. He held the phone in his hands for a long time, just staring at the screen without doing anything. Finally, William opened his phone and found the contact information for his daughter Emma. He had not called her or sent her a message in such a long time that he was not even sure if this phone number still worked. He stared at her name and phone number on the screen for what seemed like several minutes, not knowing what to do. What if Emma does not want to see me or talk to me? William asked Margaret in a worried voice. What if she is still angry with me for being such a terrible father? What if she hangs up the phone when she hears my voice? Margaret turned in her seat to look at William with understanding and encouragement in her eyes. But William, what if the opposite is true? She said gently. What if Emma does want to see you and talk to you? What if she has been waiting and hoping for you to reach out to her all this time? What if she misses you just as much as you miss her? William thought about what Margaret had said, and he realized that she might be right. Maybe Emma was not as angry with him as he thought she was. Maybe she had been hoping that he would contact her, just like he had been wanting to contact her, with his hands shaking nervously. William began typing a message to his daughter on his phone. He tried to think of the right words to say after such a long time of not talking to her. Finally, he wrote a simple but honest message. Emma, this is your dad. I know that I have been absent from your life for too long. I know that I have failed you as a father in so many ways, but I want you to know that I love you very much. And I really need to talk to you. Please give me a chance. Before sending the message, William showed his phone to Margaret so she could read what he had written. Margaret read the message carefully and then looked at William with a warm smile on her face. That is a perfect message, William, she said encouragingly. It is honest and it comes from your heart. Now you need to be brave and send it to her. Think about it this way. The worst thing that could happen is that nothing changes from how things are right now. But the best thing that could happen is that this message could change everything between you and Emma. William took a deep breath and pressed the send button on his phone. As soon as he sent the message, he felt his heart beating very fast. He was so nervous about what Emma might say back to him, or if she would even respond at all. They did not have to wait very long to find out. Within just a few minutes, William's phone made a buzzing sound to let him know that he had received a new message. William looked at his phone and saw that Emma had written back to him. Her message said, Dad, I have been hoping and waiting for you to call me or write to me. I love you too. And I have missed you so much. Please come to see me at my flat right now. I really want to talk to you. When William read this message from his daughter, he completely broke down crying. But this time, his tears were not tears of sadness and regret like they had been all night. These were tears of relief and happiness and hope for the future. She wants to see me, William whispered to Margaret through his tears. After all this time of me being a bad father, she still wants to see me and talk to me. Margaret felt tears coming to her own eyes as she watched William's joy. Love has an amazing way of surviving and staying strong, even when we think we have completely destroyed it, she said softly. Margaret carefully drove her taxi through the morning streets of Manchester towards South Manchester. Wareham lived in a small flat near the university. William sat quietly in the back seat, holding his phone tightly in his hands. He had sent the message to his daughter, and she had replied that she wanted to see him. But he was still very nervous and scared about meeting her after such a long time. As they got closer to Emma's address, William's hands started shaking even more. He kept looking out the window and then back at his phone, reading Emma's message over and over again. Margaret could see how frightened he was, so she drove extra slowly to give him more time to prepare himself for this important moment. Finally, they arrived at a row of small brick buildings where university students lived. Margaret parked her taxi right in front of Emma's building and turned off the engine. Before William could even get out of the car, the front door of the building opened quickly, and a young woman came running out onto the sidewalk. Emma looked exactly like her father William, with the same dark hair and the same shape of face. But she had her mother's warm, gentle smile and kind eyes that sparkled with love and happiness, even though she had been sleeping when she received her father's message. She had gotten dressed quickly and had been watching from her window, waiting for him to arrive. Father and daughter ran toward each other and hugged tightly right there on the sidewalk in front of everyone. Both of them started crying immediately, but these were happy tears mixed with sad tears. They had missed each other so much for such a long time. Emma held onto her father like she was afraid he might disappear again, and William held his daughter like she was the most precious thing in the entire world. Margaret sat in her taxi watching this beautiful reunion, and she felt tears coming to her own eyes. She remembered similar moments in her own life when she had been reunited with her own children after difficult times and arguments. She knew how wonderful and healing these moments of forgiveness and love could be for a family. After several minutes of hugging and crying, William remembered that Margaret was still waiting in her taxi. He walked back to the car to pay her for the long ride around the city. He reached into his wallet to get money for the fare, but Margaret shook her head and waved her hand to stop him. "You do not need to pay me anything," Margaret said with a big smile on her face. "This taxi ride tonight was a gift to me too, William. You reminded me of something very important that I had almost forgotten. You showed me that it is never too late for second chances in life. No matter how old we are or how many mistakes we have made." But William would not accept this answer. He took a large amount of money out of his wallet, much more than any taxi ride would normally cost, and he pressed it firmly into Margaret's hands. She tried to give it back to him, but he would not let her. "Please, Margaret, you must take this money," William said with tears still running down his face. "I want you to use it to buy something very special for yourself. You have given me the most precious gift in the world tonight. You helped me find the courage to reach out to my daughter, and now you have given me back the most important relationship in my life." Margaret looked at the money in her hands, and then looked at William and Emma, who were now standing together with their arms round each other. She realized that William was right. This had not been just an ordinary taxi ride. Something magical and life-changing had happened for all of them tonight. As Emma and William walked slowly toward the building entrance, talking quietly and laughing together through their tears, Margaret sat in her taxi and began thinking about her own life. She had planned for tonight to be her very last shift as a taxi driver before she retired. She had been looking forward to sleeping late in the mornings and not having to work anymore. But now, after everything that had happened with William, Margaret realized something very important about herself. Maybe she was not really ready to stop driving her taxi yet. Maybe she was not ready to stop meeting new people and helping them through difficult times in their lives. Tonight had reminded her that driving a taxi was not just about making money. It was about connecting with other human beings and sometimes being there for them when they needed help the most. Margaret made a decision right there in her taxi as she watched the sunrise painting the sky with beautiful colors. She decided that she would keep driving her taxi, not because she needed the money, but because she loved these special moments when two strangers could become friends, when broken hearts could begin to heal, and when love could find a way to survive even the most difficult situations. Margaret started her taxi engine and began driving toward the bright sunrise, knowing that every single day offers everyone the chance for a new beginning and a fresh start in life.